Greetings of peace, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Faith and Society. I am your host, Bassem Shaban, Director of the Peace Institute. And once again, we are with our distinguished guests, Pastor Stanley Murray, representing the Christian community, and Imam Muhammad Musri, representing the Muslim community. And today, we're going to be starting a new series on the state of our schools, whether they're public or private schools, with many different elements that the school system and the districts are dealing with nationwide, from what you know about with gun violence and the shooting incidents that have been taking place all over the country for the last many years. And as we see, it seems to be increasing, not decreasing. In addition, as we shared from the first episode of this series, we're also going to deal with issues related to opioid addiction, bullying, and many other issues that the school system is dealing with, and how we, with this show, dealing with faith and society, can try to find solutions and remedy the problem with our voices and our unity as a community. So first and foremost, before we have our speakers give us a part of their wisdom, we want to share a quick video about a bill that's specifically in the state of Florida, but this is a common bill taking place all over the country to give us a sense of what the nation is dealing with.
New safety measures are in place at Florida schools after Governor Ron DeSantis signed off on a plan aimed at keeping students safe. News4JAX reporter Ashley Harding joining us live this morning. Ashley, this new law addresses several big issues.
It does, Vic. This new law largely centers around training and mental health resources. Meanwhile, Democrats are pushing for more. They are now eyeing a special session on gun violence. Keeping kids and educators safe in the classroom is a priority for everyone. Yesterday, Governor Ron DeSantis signed a new bill into law which enhances procedures already in place. But House Bill 1421 also allows school resource officers to make arrests on charter school property, requires all school officers to complete crisis intervention and de-escalation training. It also requires school boards to adopt family reunification plans if there's an evacuation. School districts would also need to verify that at least 80% of personnel receive mandatory youth mental health awareness training each year. In a statement, DeSantis said every child needs a safe and secure learning environment. On the flip side, Democratic lawmakers want to take on gun violence and accessibility to firearms.
I mean, if it was up to me, we'd be calling for an assault weapons ban.
The three options they want to consider include expanding red flag laws, requiring universal background checks for all gun purchases, and the regulation of high-capacity magazines, specifically for rifles. Representative Joe Geller says this issue expands beyond mass shootings.
So this is about gun violence. This is about an epidemic of gun violence and things we can and should control.
And Secretary of State Cord Byrd said that lawmakers have until this Friday to respond to a poll about holding a special session. 60% of the House and Senate have to agree for a special session to be held. Reporting live this morning, Ashley Harding, Channel 4, the local station.
So obviously, this is a very heated debate around the country and obviously in the state of Florida. So we want to hear from our speakers and our guests about what they think is going on and how to really deal with the issue of gun violence and shooting incidents taking place. And as always, we'll start with Pastor Stanley Murray.
Thank you. I was always glad to be here. Greetings to my brother, Imam. I would just go into saying one of the key components that I think that things are being addressed with is our mental health component. It is probably the least that is serviced, not just in Florida, but in America. And it is an epidemic, if you want to say it to that extent, then that's not going to go away. We have a lot more young people who are coming out of military who didn't decide to do 20 years, who have post-traumatic stress disorders. We have domestic violence victims, as well as suspects who carry these mental health disorders. And we have children who are part of all of these environments, who did not ask to be brought into this world under those conditions, but they are a part of it. And so then they're going to school and they're being a part of various, due to social media, a lot of characterization or, what group are you with, or, what group you're involved in is now more pressure than ever before. You have to identify yourself via social media, being this person or being that person. You have to have so many Facebook friends. You have to have so many TikTok views. You have to have so many Instagram swipes to feel important and to feel valued. And so with that, that's a lot of stress. That's a lot of pressure. And so you're seeing it now coming into fruition, all of these things that we kind of neglected over the years because we just kind of got comfortable. And so now it's just almost chickens coming home to roost, if you want to say that. And it's sad because now we're playing behind the ball.
Imam Masri?
Thank you for giving us the opportunity to discuss this important topic. Every time there's a school shooting, we all come back, scramble to ask ourselves what could be done to stop these massacres of our children in the schools. And it seems that every time a discussion about gun violence is to be had, many people say, well, it's not time for that. Let's just talk right now about how to comfort the victims. And then this issue is pushed under the rug and they can kick down the road and never get really to the core issue, why our society is so flush with assault rifles accessible by people with mental illness. And if you track almost all of the mass shootings, we see that some AR-15 or version of it has been used to cause mass casualty. And for us, it is obvious. If a plane crashes, we expect the government to hold the airline responsible and the manufacturer responsible, and you do an investigation and make sure that whatever you're going to do for the public, the flying public, you have to ensure the safety. And in terms of school after school experiencing mass shootings, and the government action is basically nothing. And they are unwilling to defy the gun lobby and stop the sale of assault rifles to civilians who don't really need it. We're not in the military. And number two, they're not willing to really put the resources necessary to address mental health, which is, as the pastor said, it is a real crisis that's not being served. So between these two issues, we will continue to suffer until responsible people in government take the right action to. I think if we allow lawsuits against gun manufacturers, we're going to see a reduction of sales of these types of weapons. If we, put enough resources into mental health, we would see that the people who need that help will get it. But until some people, take action, we're going to continue to, unfortunately, lose young people in our schools.
So with that description from both of you, do you think this is just another issue nationwide that has been politicized, where it seems that, like the Imam gave the example of an airline that crashes and everybody starts to change policy and look and investigate, but in this case, it doesn't, cause much action. There's a lot of rhetoric, there's a lot of blaming, but there's not a lot of action. So do you think this is politicized, where to the point where it seems that politics trumps the lives of children and parents and regular people in the community? What do you guys think?
Well, I think there's definitely not a unity to the issue. And why there is such a large division continues to divide others. There's probably little that would go against the airplane description that Imam gave of, wow, something needs to be done. As with the gun issue, as I continue to view and as you continue to view through the news media, it becomes politics for some reason. But, planes falling out of the sky aren't necessarily descriptive under the Constitution, as well as guns are. So maybe that's the drawback, is because it's designated directly to our quote unquote freedoms, that causes the rift that we have. I would just like to add that just viewing how things are heading and viewing how things are going, and Imam gave an excellent analogy of continuing to kick the can down the road. Will it ever get addressed properly? I'm sure it'll be talked about. I'm sure it'll be discussed. I'm sure it'll be debated. The question is, will we come up with a final outcome of what needs to be said and what needs to be done? I think that's what seems to be the drawback, is no matter what happens at a school, no matter what happens at a supermarket, no matter what happens wherever it happens, at a 4th of July parade, it doesn't seem to change that the conversation keeps continuing to be the conversation. And it's almost as if we talk without the intent to come up with a real solution. And if that is the fact that we're looking at here, then something dreadful is only going to continue to be the social norm. That's kind of what I'm sensing. It's almost as if when something happens, okay, it's another shooting. It's another mass incident. And if we probably look at the year of 2022 from January till now, there's probably at least 50. And anything mass, is over 2 people, you would consider it to be some form of a mass shooting. We probably got over 50 of those different ones. Some make the news, some don't. And some are happening at places of worship, which brings us back to where we are today with myself and Imam and yourself, Brother Bassem, how we have to be conscious to our people, because people come to worship. They don't come to worry. And if they have to worry while they're at the places of worship that they're in, that something's going to happen, then now the beacon of light, which is the houses of worship, we are the beacon of light. And if we're now forced to have our places of worship look like the Pentagon, with armed guards at the door, or armed guards in our sanctuary, sanctified, sacred areas, then people aren't going to come. Because they're too distracted to worship God in that manner. And so we have to sit down and continue to plug out to our appointed people who are in place, and see what their decision-making skills are when it comes to across the table. What are we voting for? Are we looking at what they're voting about? Even in a non-presidential election year. And I think that's where we really find the lacking during that time. The voting, it drops almost 60% to the amount of people who actually vote during a president election year versus a non-president election year.
Imam?
Well, so the schools, as the pastor said, like places of worship, should be worry-free in order for teachers to teach and children to learn. You cannot have guns. So proposals as arm the teachers or, have good guys with a gun to stop bad guys with a gun. These ideas are non-starters. The schools have to be gun-free zones. Officers who are guarding the school might be armed, but these have to be law enforcement who are trained, who know how and when to use it, and to stop, mass shooters as before they go into the school. As far the society at large, as the pastor said, it's not just limited to schools or houses of worship or restaurants or 4th of July parades and things like that, theaters. So we have a bigger problem, unlike other developed countries, where we find the number of mass shootings is minimal or non-existent, because those countries have adopted a policy that they will not allow assault weapons to be in the hands of regular people. And we as a society that call ourselves civilized and advanced, we allow these killing machines that are unlike the muskets that it took few minutes to load and reload each time. These with high capacity magazines can kill within seconds dozens of people. And it's even hard for law enforcement to confront individuals who are carrying sometimes multiple assault rifles with multiple high capacity magazines. Just one person can stop an army. And that what made again and again officers even hesitate to get in, because there is a major loss of life. So we have to call it as it is. This is the politicians cowering to the gun industry, and they are not even allowing a real discussion in Congress and the state House and Senate to address these issues, and they are treating it quite different. While no person who doesn't have a license can sell, Tylenol to another person or any other medication, here a person can sell a gun to another person without having to have a license. And we all know guns have single use, and that is to kill. So we have to call it as it is. This is an issue not going to be resolved by adding more resource officers and adding this and adding that and, checking backpacks. No, this has to be dealt with. I mean, many schools or many districts have imposed on parents that they have to buy transparent backpacks, so the children have to suffer, but we are not willing to tell the gun industry you cannot sell these types of weapons in the stores or on the street. So in my humble opinion, we are not dealing with the elephant in the room. We are just focused on everything else that we know the outcome of it is not going to change the reality in the schools. Parents are no longer feeling schools are safe, and more parents are pulling their children out and teaching them at home, homeschooling them. Many are choosing online, not because that's their first preference, but if they are given the choice between losing their child to a massacre or keeping their child alive, they say, I'll have to work on teaching my child. And more and more, we as a society have to look in the mirror and say the problem is us. The leadership is unwilling and unable to take the right decisions. And as the pastor said, we should vote them out, and we should put people who want to serve their constituents, not the gun industry.
So in our last section, where do you guys think we go from here? In addition to what you mentioned, both of you, if the politicians are not doing much about this, what is the role of the citizenry, whether we're parents or not, whether we have kids in the school system or not, to really represent what the Constitution stands for, we the people, that we technically are the government? Because even with the incident in Uvalde, Texas, where there was a lot of guns by law enforcement there, and there's a lot of criticism of how law enforcement reacted and took their time, that led to, unfortunately, the loss of a lot of children, getting shot by the person who perpetrated the event itself. So obviously, as the Imam mentioned, with the notion of a good guy with a gun is better than a bad guy with a gun, that somewhat contradicts the notion itself. So where do you think, from both of you, we go from here as the community itself? Because we are obviously the majority and the leadership are the minority. Pastor?
Well, I think, of course, always we have to start with our local government that we deal with on a daily basis, and implementation of having a voice that it goes back to those who are in our national offices. But also we have to realize that we have to educate our public, not just guns that are bought legally, but guns that are stolen illegally. There was a survey that showed in the area that we're in, 7 out of 10 guns that were taken out of a vehicle, the car was unlocked. Burglaries that are occurring to homes, the guns are in known places, under your mattress, in your nightstand, under your pillow, in your closet, on the top shelf, not in a safe area, not in a safe that you have put a weapon. And so we have to also educate our public on keeping legal guns that have been bought from winding up in illegal hands, but also continuing to push forward gun safety to our young people, acknowledging that all the way down to our kindergarten, working our way up. What do you do if you see a gun in the room? We teach them how to run, tell a parent, don't touch, because we're also losing a lot of children to gun misfires, accidental deaths. And so we got to make sure that and then let's not even talk about, I know we're talking about guns per se for schools, but this is still students. These are school kids that are committing suicide with weapons. So at the end of the day, the name gun keeps coming up. So we have to start asking ourselves, what is our long-term plan? I mean, short-term, as my brother said earlier, they keep kicking the can down the road. But long-term, I mean, this is only going to get worse and worse and worse, in my opinion, if we don't start coming up with some legal reasons that we can start stalemating some of this stuff. I'm all for, not being able to purchase a firearm until you're 21. If you're 18, you need to be with a person that's over at age 18. I just think and you could have been shooting since you were 12, but I still think it's like driving. You could have been driving since you were 14, but because the law says you need to be with a licensed driver to a certain age, it makes sense, because you're driving a 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 pound piece of metal that could injure or kill someone. So it's almost the same thing with a weapon of that sort. You should have supervisory details put over you to ensure you don't do the wrong thing. Not by even on purpose, but on accident as well. So I think that's one thing we should definitely look at.
Imam?
Well, I know that, most people in this country believe in being armed and don't see a problem with owning a gun. I personally think that as people of God and as people who seek to live in peace with our neighbors, I think guns should be limited to law enforcement. It should not, it has really no use for the general public. And I don't think it's a wise investment. As the pastor said, many children and family members die because of mishandling of firearms, and because parents who are negligent, they don't secure these firearms in proper safes. And we hear horror stories about children shooting themselves or their siblings. We hear about them shooting their parents unintentionally. We see that as a society, we have such laissez-faire with firearms, and we glorify them in the movies. We let the games be filled with the idea of shooting things. So no wonder our youth who are used to shooting in games, zombies and people, that they don't see a problem in shooting real people because they expect them to come back to life. And if we create a new culture of peace and the culture of saving lives, especially to our, conservative colleagues who believe in the sanctity of life, and they are against abortions, and we say, isn't it worse when you have people children walking to school or attending school being shot? That is murder. So help us to eliminate weapons from the streets, from society, so thieves cannot, steal them because they're not there. And limit it to the military and to law enforcement, and make our homes gun-free, make our schools gun-free, our stores gun-free, our theaters, wherever people gather, they should feel safe. And guns should only be in the hands of professionals who are law enforcement officers who are trained how to handle them properly. And then I think that will reduce the number of casualties across the board in societies as well as in schools dramatically, just like other countries, civilized countries. We are not, in some country that doesn't have a government, doesn't have laws, doesn't have military, and it's gangs running the show. This is not the wild, wild west. This is the United States of America in the 21st century. And we could be better than this. So let's stop glorifying guns in our movies, in our music, and our conversations, and let's create a culture of love and peace and brotherhood that hopefully it will put in the minds and hearts of people. We don't need to own guns, and we don't need to kill each other to get ahead.
Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have. Thank you very much, as always, for your words of wisdom. We hope to continue this conversation about education and the many issues that they're facing and how the community can come together for resolutions, not only with violence, but with many other topics that we will cover in the next few episodes. So thank you very much once again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And for our listeners, we look forward to seeing you in another episode. Please make sure to subscribe to the channel, and please feel free to add your comments to the YouTube channel video related to this and other video episodes that we've done. And we will probably bring them up to the future meetings that we will have with Pastor Stanley and Imam Musri. So thank you very much, and keep the peace going. Take care.